Years ago, I had this idea. What if, in between the knowledge you want to acquire in yourself, was basically just nothing? What if you directly could access the knowledge, kind of? I mean, I already had the dream as a child to just take a USB and just download the information and then it would be there. I mean, in the future, obviously, this is something that could be possible, but now, with COVID-19, I think we have reached a point where the middleman, being the teacher, is kind of removed more and more. And this is actually something that's very interesting. Why? Because a teacher, I mean, if it's not a personal teacher, then the problem, per definition, is that if you have a class of 30 people, how would you, by any chance, get the level of all these people right? Because if you say something like 1 + 1 = 2, then the first dude is like, what is plus? And the guy in the back could be like, yeah, what are we even doing here? I haven't even finished my bachelor thesis, for example, could he be saying. Therefore, the approach to get one fits all for 20, 30 people is just something that's inherently rigged. I mean, this is not about like criticizing school in general. I think just like school worked also when I was in school, it's just something that was like the best iteration to something. I mean, obviously more teachers would be nice, but who's gonna pay all the teachers in a world where we don't have like 3 times the money, and in a world where pretty much every state on earth is in big debt apart from China? The problem is obviously that there is not enough money, and therefore education could obviously be something that is of higher value, but there are also other things like maybe getting actual retirement payments for older people, or maybe actually paying for all the other things that are also important. It's a prioritization issue, but it's not really a prioritization issue because, I mean, there have been people around talking about this, thinking about this for years, and this is kind of the best thing we've got. So therefore, I don't think it makes really much sense to just put something online or just state in public, yeah, the school system is broken and here is how we do it. That's just not something that's very useful for anybody or anyone. So therefore, what I think, and this is also something I experienced myself, what I think the internet, so this is kind of where the internet comes in, and this is where just a future of knowledge just might, of a future of democratization of knowledge just might await us, and is already happening. I mean, it has been happening for like 20 to 30 years since the internet kind of started. Also, obviously before, because there have been people writing books and some people could read these books. 500 years ago, not many people could read these books because most people couldn't read. But now we get into the base level of education is now kind of so high that, I mean, obviously there are also countries where it's still not on a kind of base level where you actually can read properly and something like this. But the world is getting better, and the world is getting better very quick, and we don't even realize how fast it is getting better. Also in terms of education, this is kind of a statement out of Hans Rosling's book, which I don't know the title of, but yeah, I'm just referencing him here right now. So, what was the development is what was happening? The thing is that if I want to teach a concept to you, then obviously I could come up with all the stuff again and again and again, like for every single student. For example, a teacher that teaches something that's very kind of basic, like playing the guitar. In the beginning, you have to learn the chords, and then you start like maybe improvising. And then the thing is, if you get all the music theory in the beginning, then it's just like, oh yeah, what am I gonna play next, theoretically? And then, so let's just say there is a fixed plan. Then someone obviously had to come up with the plan, and then it's just the responsibility of the teacher to just say the things and just learn the things, basically to present, basically learn the presentation. And if you then do the presentation, then, I mean, nobody knows if you really know the stuff or if it is just something you learned, and therefore you just are able at this particular point in time to say it, but 10 years from now you wouldn't have any clue at all. There is actually a story, I think it was Max Planck, who had a chauffeur, and the chauffeur listened to all of his, so Max Planck held a few talks within Germany or also within Switzerland. I don't really know. Probably within Europe. And then what happened is that the chauffeur, so the driver, obviously he listened to the talks. And therefore, after a few days, after a few instances where he listened to these talks, he was like, I could do it. And then there was actually one particular talk where because people back then didn't really know how Max Planck looked like, and also there were like newspapers and the internet, they just switched the roles. And therefore, the chauffeur held the talk. I don't know how the story exactly went out, because I just heard it a few years ago. But this is basically the thing. The role of the teacher is to be the intermediary between the knowledge itself and the human. But and the human who wants to learn, the learner. But the problem obviously is that, about things that people are doing, it really much having somebody who actually can do the thing we want to do. Like when it comes to craftsmanship, for example, it is really nice to have somebody who just knows how to do it. But obviously, somebody who knows how to do it could also abstract the knowledge further and write a book about it. Obviously, the thing is that this would then be too complicated. Therefore, if we experience things in real life, instead of like reading a book and then actually having to visualize all the things, because if you read about and then imagine there's a hammer, and there was a time when video didn't exist. Therefore, obviously you can teach things by video now, and this already is basically taking the teacher and multiplying the teacher. Obviously you cannot really ask questions, but this is also sometimes it's a live thing, then you can actually ask questions. Obviously, the more people watch the live thing, the less your actual question will be, less likely is your actual question to be answered. But the thing is now, so we have these people-based knowledge, I guess, which is the knowledge, for example, actors would tell you about how is it to act. And the thing is that we mix up the knowledge itself and also the social connections. Because obviously our brain still works on a very social basis. So for example, if I know someone that does this thing, that I believe much more that this is actually possible because I know someone, and therefore it's much more real. Therefore, the more things are real for us, the more things that should be taught are real, are basically similar to reality, the easier it is to learn them. Because we just grew up experiencing this. Obviously, the only thing you know for sure is basically nothing. So therefore, the only thing that exists is your thoughts. You don't even know if this is your body. It could be also a completely different body. You could be like in a dream. You don't even know, and you could wake up any minute and you would just, oh yeah, I woke up. Because in a dream, you don't realize you're dreaming, and then you wake up and you're just, oh yeah, it was a dream. But if you woke up in real life, therefore the thing is, the only thing that exists basically is our abstract mind. And we cannot even be sure that it will exist tomorrow. So therefore, we don't really have a lot of things. But what I'm saying is, the closer the experience of learning things is closer to the reality we experience, which is completely crazy if you think about it. You can drive to completely... And you can experience all these things, and you interact in a world that is very complicated, and you can go out and just walk without you even thinking about walking. But now, let's get back to the basics. Let's get back to the school system and to learning. Not really the school system, but the entire education system maybe. Here is the thing. If someone makes things really good, if someone is very knowledgeable, then the theory is that maybe the best one of all these teachers could come up with a concept that was just very logic. A concept that maybe also included programs that would be adapted to the student's knowledge, for example, which is something a teacher cannot really do if he has 20 or 30 people in class. Obviously, during COVID, the classes were actually broken down, and I actually spoke to a teacher, and he was like, yeah. And we realized that this is actually a far better concept, like talking to fewer students every other week, even though we don't have that much, they don't spend that much time with us. We can be more individual and actually be like, oh yeah, the thing you wrote in this essay was actually not so good or good. But for example, what happened with me, this is just an example, a personal example. I just wrote an essay for school, and then you get it back and you have like 5 lines, and this is what's happened with everybody. This is just an example I use, but and then the teacher is like, yeah, and I don't have time, and there are also 3 other people behind you waiting for maybe a comment, and I also want to take my lunch break. I mean, it's not that the teachers are evil, it's just that these are just the constraints. And I mean, it's not kind of sad, it's just how things worked. There is nothing to be said about this. But now, what I think will be kind of happening, and also already is happening, everybody now can just record video and publish it. That's just a fact. I mean, almost everybody who has access to things like these, and also obviously you have to be like as rich as I am to, I mean, if I personally don't really consider myself as very rich. It's just if I take like a very grateful state of, okay, there are also people who have far less than me, then obviously I have like very much privileges, or very many privileges, and therefore I am kind of very, very rich, also compared to just, and I can afford to buy a new Galaxy S10 and also a mic and just record things like these. But now, this is just about everybody can record. Obviously, statements like these are never totally true, but the thing is now, everybody who has a phone at least can record things. Whether the quality of the things or how the quality of these things influences the perception of the content is another story, and also influences the motivation to actually produce this kind of content, and how the internet speed is there wherever you record these things and when you upload these things. These are all just different things, but the basic concept is this, that everybody with a camera can now record themselves. And you obviously can also screen record your phone. Therefore, you can basically, and you have the entire internet on your phone if you have internet access. Therefore, what you can do is you can just Google something, screen record it, and talk while you do it. And a teacher can just screen record his phone or his notebook while actually doing the thing the teacher usually does in the classroom. So therefore, this is just the basic concept of one person speaking to one or many other persons. But now we have different concepts. We have concepts like apps, like learning apps, like Duolingo. It's not that everybody who ever spoke a language learned his app with Duolingo, and obviously this is just an exaggeration, but this is also how things can work, and especially with physical problems, for example. With chemistry, like with these basic sciences, often the teacher is just the intermediary, and actually what you want to know is like how reality actually works. And how reality actually works can often be explained better just by watching a video of something. For example, I watched a video, or actually a professor of mine just made a graph where it was like just a normal graph, and then the sinus is actually a circle, kind of. And then if you take the sinus function, so not obviously the sinus itself is not a circle, but yeah, well, then you have like the sinus function, and then how the sinus function actually works is basically by just drawing the cycle, and then the sinus function. And I saw this, and I just kind of understood it. And before it was like, yeah, and then there is this painting, and let me just draw another graph, and then this takes another entire 10 minutes, and this is just not the best method to learn, like drawing with a chalk on a chalkboard. Obviously, I mean, it's kind of obvious, and this is also not how things nowadays work really anymore, but to a huge extent, this is kind of still how things work. Obviously, there's the part of the social interaction, and also just learning from another human is also something that's very nice, and probably our brain is also just very familiar with this kind of learning. But basically, it looks like this, I think. There's the content, the actual knowledge you want to acquire, and there's you. And depending on what content it is, I think in the future, there just might be a program as intermediary. There might just be a program where you actually learn the stuff, and then you actually see the video of the sinus curve, and then you're, yeah, that's this. And every time from now on, you just imagine the video instead of a teacher talking for like 50 minutes, and everybody in classroom obviously thinks something totally different when he speaks about it. Obviously, it's not always something totally different, but if we don't standardize these visualizations, for example, by just having them, then obviously the students have to imagine these things themselves. What if it's, I mean, just another example of how analog school till a few years ago really was. I mean, if you think about it, typing is basically handwriting on steroids. But in my entire school career, in every single exam, we had to handwrite. And I'm not a good handwriter. And also I can, at least right now, I can type like 75 words a minute, which is not the best speed ever. But if I had the same speed in school, then I probably would have had like 3 times the time in every single exam where I actually had to write stuff on alone. But that's just another example. So here is what could be the future. The future could be learning apps. The future could be programs. The future could be websites. For example, I learned to code a specific language by just going onto this website, and the website was designed and it was also gamified, using elements of gamification in order to make things more appealing. Therefore, I mean, the knowledge about psychology, about human psychology, for example, is advancing and advancing. And if we just take these already existing advancements or the existing knowledge and just implement it, I mean, things like Instagram make addictive. Why not design learning apps that make totally addictive? Obviously, addictive is always something that's negative, being addictive or being addicted to something. But if companies like YouTube, if Instagram, Facebook, if all these companies can pretty much make you addicted to their content by just being installed on your phone, and then magic happens and you are using all these different principles, why not just make, I mean, obviously this is a very macabre and a very rigged comparison, but what if instead of making people addicted to YouTube, to Netflix, you just took the same resources? I mean, that's obviously economy. That's just how economy works. But in theory, what if you could apply the same principles, the same resources, and make children addicted to math, addicted to learning English, addicted to being a scientist? And that's kind of the end of the video, I guess. So therefore, I think there is a huge development already happening and will be happening about people now can basically record whatever comes to their mind and put it onto the internet. Which consequences this has for their personal lives and so on, this is just an entirely different story. But basically, everybody can create a podcast right now. If you have, for example, I wrote things for years before I decided to publish them. But until you decide to publish these things, they have no value whatsoever for anybody but you. I mean, it's not that I think it has the highest value of all, but if just one person listens to you, it's the same as in real life, where you speak with a friend and you talk for 2 hours and then one person listens to you. And if I talk for 2 hours and one person watches the video, then it's obviously kind of the same thing. Provided I don't have like huge amounts of back-end work. But if now everybody does this, not everybody, but everybody or not everybody every time, but every time you think, you just learn something and then you could just share it. I mean, it's just an offer. Nobody has to watch it, but if it's out there, then people in the future can't just search all these topics. If we in the future have all these videos, for example, maybe better videos than mine, but if in the future, for example, transcribing works even better, then you could just go and search through all the content of everything that was said. Obviously, there's also a huge privacy concern and things like this, but that's just what technology is and will be capable of. And then we can just go through and search all these things. For example, I make like notes for myself and I store them in OneNote. And whenever I now am like, oh yeah, what about this? For example, what about a specific instance, or what about this year? And then I can just go through my notes and just search for the specific year, and then everything I wrote down for the specific year just appears. Or you have a keyword like bananas, and then every time you wrote down something that was not familiar, but every time you wrote the word banana down, it just keeps appearing. And this is something that's very useful. If you, for example, search for YouTube, if you search for YouTube on my notebook, then you will find very many entries because I tried to figure this thing out, and therefore I thought a lot about it, and I also wrote things down, and therefore I think there is a bright future ahead of us, a bright future for education, a bright future where the democratization of knowledge is the best it has ever been, and it already is, but it can get even better.